Buon pomeriggio, grazie a tutti per essere con noi oggi in occasione del lancio virtuale di ECCO, il nuovo...
Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for being here today with us at the virtual launch of ECCO, the new independent Italian think tank entirely dedicated to energy issues. Today, we have a very interesting agenda. My name is Giulia Giordano, and I'm head of strategy and development at ECCO, and I'll be moderating the discussion, but also between the discussions that we'll be hearing this afternoon and the speakers. I'll give you a quick introduction. I have recently returned to Italy after a period abroad, many years in the Middle East, working in the university environment, civil society, and in recent years I worked for a regional organization, an Israeli-Palestinian-Jordanian regional organization involved in environmental cooperation. These important lessons showed me the value of bringing together various people and groups to tackle shared challenges. And this is which we try to do at ECCO, to tackle the climate change, one of the most significant issues of our time. I'd like to thank all of you, Luca, Matteo, the speakers, the participants, for being here today. It's very important for us. I have a little bit of technical information. First of all, the entire event will be conducted in Italian and in English. So for international guests, we do have an Italian to English translation available. You just need to click on the channel to listen to English for the translation for Italian to English. Another piece of information is that we'd like to encourage active participation. So please do share your thoughts, any questions in the chat box. And if you have specific questions, we will have a Q&A session at the end, an open Q&A session. So please do write your questions in the Q&A box. And if we have time at the end, we will respond to these questions. We're also being streamed live on our platforms on YouTube and on Twitter. And we also invite anyone watching on these channels to leave comments and to leave any questions they'd like to ask. We have a packed agenda today. The first segment will be opened by Luca, who's the co-founder of ECCO, followed by some very high-level presentations on Italian leadership in tackling climate change. We'll then have a discussion about climate diplomacy, especially in this year 2021, a very important year, and end up with a round table on Italian needs in tackling the climate change. And we also have the pleasure of ending with a photographic presentation by an internationally renowned photographer, Luca Locatelli. So we have a lot to talk about and to explain what ECCO is and the vision and mission of ECCO. We've drawn up an inception paper which collects together our main ideas, the main things we will be presenting. We decided to leave this as an open document because we see it as something which is a work in progress and will be changed and modified over time with the contribution of all the players that we intend to work with. So to talk about the vision of ECCO and to give you more details about it, I'd like to give the floor immediately to Luca Bergamosky, who is the co-founder of ECCO, together with Matteo Leonardi. And he has years of experience in working in climate change. Before founding ECCO, he was an advisor to Laurence Tubiana, who we will be listening to today, who's one of our guests. He's worked with E3G, international think tank, also with us today. And he also assisted the Prime Minister's office with the energy and climate negotiations when Italy held the presidency of the G7. Luca.
Grazie.
Thank you so much, Julia.
Just to say thank you to all our international guests, and in particular to our friends from the European Climate Foundation. I'm not exaggerating if I say that we wouldn't be here without the support of European and international philanthropy. So thank you very much to Laurence Tubiana and her team, the director and former colleagues at ECF. I would like to thank also Alison Robershaw from the BALD Foundation from the UK, and also our friends from E3G and WWF Italy, who will support us through strategic partnership. I also would like to thank our advisory council and all the people that advise us, including Maria Grazia Midulla, Pia Saraceno, Silvia Francescon, Linda Kalker, and Jonathan Gaventa. Our team of 15 people that you will get to know over the next weeks and months. Also, thank you very much for your support, and to Matteo and Julia in particular. And finally, I'd like to also thank you, my partner Camilla, for putting up with me during lockdown, and to be always a source of inspiration. So let me now start presenting ECCO. ECCO, allora, chi siamo e dove veniamo? Buongiorno a tutti, buon pomeriggio a tutti. ECCO è un punto di arrivo, è il punto di arrivo di tante conversazioni che molti di noi hanno avuto negli ultimi anni sull'esigenza di un cambio di passo.
So, who is ECCO and where do we come from? Good afternoon to everyone. Welcome. ECCO is a starting point. It's the starting point and a point of arrival of a lot of conversations we've had over the years about the need to change the pace in climate policy in Italy, and we need to change the pace in how we talk, interpret and act on climate in Italy. We need to tackle 4 particular weaknesses that we want to address. The first is to build a collective vision for climate and to develop paths to achieve that vision. The second is to ensure consistency in national and international climate policies with the climate targets. The third is to strengthen the ability to make policies independent of fossil fuels and their interests. And the fourth is to contribute through the participation and discussion, creating a new language, if you like, to tackle the political, economic, social and geopolitical dimensions of the climate challenge. It's a starting point, but it's also a point of departure. The name ECCO contains the initials of climate change and energy. It also represents a novel approach. The word ECCO meaning here we are, let's go. We want to be a no-profit independent organization, part of civil society. We wish to accelerate climate action and we work in the public interest. We're independent, which means that we only look at analyses and scenarios based on facts and science without interference from any specific interests. So we have 4 specific ways of action, 4 specific approaches. The first is our analyses and scenarios, which, as I said, are based on facts and science. That's very important. We will be working to connect and interact with institutions in politics, in civil society, and in business. We will be promoting our ideas, obviously. And finally, we think we need new diplomacy tools and practices to understand what other countries are doing, to connect the national and the international, and vice versa. And there are 2 main areas of work. The first is domestic. We will be focusing on the transformation of the energy sector. So how to make an ordered transformation from fossil fuels to renewables, starting specifically in Italy with how to exit from using fossil gas. We need to understand the best transformation for the industrial system, so producing scenarios for the chemicals, steel and cement industries, and understanding the social impacts of that. We'll be looking at transformation funding, the transformation of funding, private and public funding, and also looking at the dynamics and prospects in reforming governance, i.e. the responsibilities at the various levels from local to national. Finally, we will be looking at the European and international area. So Italy's role in implementing the Italian Green Deal, the 54-55 package, and also internationally as president of the Italian G20 and COP26, and how Italy can play a key role. All of this you will be able to read about in our inception paper. You'll get to know us further down the line, but I'd like to now leave the floor to our guests. I'd like to thank you, and we can't wait to start work together. Thank you very much.
I'd like to switch to our first segment, the need of Italian leadership for climate action. We start this segment with our first keynote speaker. She is the CEO of the European Climate Foundation. She is one of the founding figures of the Paris Accords. She chaired the board of directors of the French Development Agency. Professor Laurence Tubiana, thank you for being with us and for the support of ECCO. What we would like to discuss today is this very special year, 2021 for Italy, offers great opportunities, challenges, and responsibilities. Responsibilities to take the lead on climate action. And we want to ask you your perspective on that. Why there is a need in Europe, especially of an Italian leadership, and is the success of the Italian story functional to the success of Europe today? Thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, and I'm very happy to be here to welcome the ECCO creation, and I'm very happy as well that this organization is now a new one, a new voice, an independent voice in Italy to make the case for a different development pathways in line with Paris Agreement, but really taking into account all the complexity of this transition. And of course, ECF is supporting organizations like ECCO in many countries of Europe. And I think it's these type of voices, informed, reflexive, and politically savvy as well, is really important. And all the connection you will make, the recommendation, you are very well placed to develop that. So I'm very happy your existence, and very happy that we could have supported you in just creating that. As you say, Italy has a potential, and in a way, every eyes are fixed on Italy for a very good reason. There is a massive effort, financial effort of solidarity vis-à-vis Italy in the context of the COVID crisis. And the way Italy will use these recovery funds will be a testimony of the belief of this is really this massive investment can really unleash a transition to green economy. And the first, in a way, declaration, and in a way, the discussion around the recovery plan in Italy itself before the new government came in, and the new statement of the Mario Draghi, for example, was really interesting to see that the green, really the zero carbon transition to zero carbon, what at the center of that plans. And so that's why I think every eyes are really turned to Italy because of this test of the credibility of these funds. The second, of course, the leadership that Mario Draghi is showing, saying there is no other alternative than to go green. And of course, the responsibility on the top of that on the international scene because of G20 and the preparation of the COP26. For all those reasons, it's really important for Italy to succeed. And I'm happy if ECCO, and I'm sure you would play a big role to help do that and deliver that in a context which is not easy internationally. We have good signs, of course, in a way, last September 2020, the Chinese declaration, of course, then the US elections result. But at the same time, we see the tensions, we see the difficulties, we see the negotiation, both at G7 and G20, how difficult it is to really anchor this notion of transition in the recovery plan. So it's really in the global economy. So the battle is in front of us, it's not behind us. And I'm sure that ECCO will play its full role to help the Italian community at large to really influence these processes, these international processes, the national processes, and the EU to be really not to lose the perspective and really to deliver, in particular on the 55% emissions reduction. We need the plan. By June, we'll have some kind of elements of the plan, but Italy will play a big role to get that a consensus around that, and a serious one, not just vague numbers, but really concrete pathways to get there. We have really to terminate the fossil fuel public support. It's not there, and we have to do it. We know that still we are spending a lot on export policy for gas, for example, or for other fossil fuels as well. And no new investment on fossil fuels should be a direction that Italy can promote and hopefully will promote, and that could allow other countries to join. In 2021, because of the G20, Italy has to do it best, again, with all the constraints we know, that major powers has to adopt ambitious commitment in the G20 on the nature of the recovery, on the nature of the climate finance, and on the nature, finally, of the commitments of the NDCs for COP26. So if the G7 and G20 doesn't deliver at the financial and support level and on the ambition, it will be very difficult to have a success in Glasgow. So again, I know it's difficult. I know, and again, even the June meeting on Europe is a very important milestone. So there are many very important milestones we should not miss. And I'm sure, anyway, I will say the best luck to the team ECCO to contribute to that enormously crucial moment. It was a crucial moment to create ECCO, so it was the right moment, the right decision. But of course, we have to gather around this major objective to help Italy fulfill fully its role. And I'm very hopeful of that. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tubiana, for these very encouraging words. We're definitely ready for the challenge. And talking about, the need of a transition from fossil fuels, what is the role that renewable energies can have? So, voglio introdurre il prossimo speaker, direttore generale di IRENA, l'Agenzia
I would like to introduce the next speaker, who is the Director General of IRENA, the International Agency for Renewable Energies. He's been Director General for Sustainable Development, Energy and Climate for the Italian Environment Ministry, and has represented Italy at many international forums, including the UN Climate Change Conference, COP21. So, what is the role of renewables, and can Italy play a leadership role? This is with the national context of the recovery fund. So what is the role of renewables in energy transition? Thank you, Francesco Camera. Thank you, Giulia Matteo, for having invited me to this event, this launch event, and for giving me the opportunity to see you again, unfortunately, only virtually, so lots of familiar faces and friends. Good afternoon, everyone. Leadership is a very important issue, and I'm glad this has been made a focal point of the discussion, in which Italy is presenting itself on the international scene. Leadership means being able to guide decision-making processes effectively to be able to achieve targets. Time is the decisive variable in climate change. It'll be the next 10 years that will show us whether the mid-century targets will be reached or not. The more time passes, the more difficult it will be to take the right direction to achieve zero emissions. We're already paying the price. We have atmospheric phenomena without precedent, fires, drought. These are net costs in economic and social costs for the entire planet. Energy transition to renewables and renewables are the main ways we're going to achieve these targets. 80% of greenhouse gases are created by fossil fuels now. So if we want to achieve decarbonization, we need to start from energy. We need to create a new energy system. We need to create a clean system that will need to be inclusive and sustainable. Moreover, our analyses show that energy transition is not just fighting climate change, it's also a source of growth, a source of employment, and the main way of improving security and health, security in supplies. The transition has already begun. It's been about 8 to 9 years in which we've seen the renewables taking over from fossil fuels in terms of capacity. The problem is that we need to increase, we need to accelerate the rate at which this is happening. The pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic is the tragedy of our times. The consequences, we still can't tell what the consequences will be of the pandemic. The amount of public resources that have been directed to dealing with the pandemic is without precedent. So the policies and investments that we make today, we put in place today to manage energy and climate change will to try and meet the Paris Accord and achieve sustainable energy will be what we do today. 3 times of what is invested in fossil fuels will be delivered back. Up to €4 in private investment. This is the effort we need to make of public-private partnerships where we can make a difference. An energy transition linked to the objectives of the Paris Accord to limit temperature rises to 1.5 degrees will contribute to growth to a major extent. We believe that this will contribute to 1.5% to GDP by 2030, which will create employment in the energy industry. And for 2020, the installation of renewables shows that we've had a record year. We've installed major amounts of renewables in 2020. Energy prices from renewables are increasingly affordable. And I'm not talking about changing over from switching fuel. We're talking about creating a completely new system, which is flexible, interconnected, highly digitalized, and consumers that can become producers, an energy system that will be based on renewables with green hydrogen and the latest generation bioenergy as well. Italy will show its leadership by hosting the G20 in line with working on G20 with the UK government by giving national contributions within COP26 and the Commission for Energy Change. It's a key year for us to make concrete commitments to aim for the Paris Accord aims and for the thresholds we hope to reach by September. I know that how hard we're all working towards this. In Italy, the Recovery and Resilience Plan aims to achieve some excellent limits. We can be an example to our neighboring countries to be in how we are sustainable and respectful for the environment. Every independent voice that can help to disseminate information, to give solutions, to provide analyses is important to be able to enable it to tackle the climate challenge more and more effectively and to be a protagonist in the front line. So the best wishes to you, best wishes to your work, your commitment, and the commitment of Minister Giovannini, the ministers who have a great responsibility for taking the country in this direction. Irene is at your service, at their service. So best wishes to all of you. Thank you so much, Dr. La Camera, and for underlining a very important point for us, which is to look at ecological translation as an opportunity for economic growth and development for the country. And this is something I'd like to talk about with the next speaker too, who unfortunately has to leave us pretty soon. So that's Deputy Minister Toda, who's also been an undersecretary and is from the world of business herself. And so, yes, Deputy Minister for Economic Development. So looking at industry specifically, to see whether in this area industrial reconversion in terms of decarbonization could be an opportunity as well, and that will not leave anyone out. So thank you very much for your contribution.
Well, thank you so much for this beautiful opportunity. I'm happy I can actually attend the launch of Think Tank. Any independent voice, as it has been said before, can be really crucial in a context where governmental institutions have to be challenged for the energy transition to take place. The objective we have in Italy is very ambitious. We want to progressively work on all domains: production, mobility, supply of services, going through the food production and social activities. Everything will have to be rethought so that we can impact the least. So actually the approach for the energy transition has to be a corporate one. And this is why production activities are so essential. And how can we be effective? Well, we can support the market to stimulate the demand, incentivize production models, manufacturing models which are compatible from an environmental standpoint. We did mention the iron, the steel, as well as the chemical, concrete. These are all pillars that will allow us to move towards a more environmental friendly and sustainable way. And also we want to be a playing field fair from a European standpoint, but also from an Italian standpoint. What I mean is that if we can manufacture our products and transform our activities in a sustainable manner, but then of course the European market is being inundated and overflowed by Chinese steel, where they don't really, let's say, share and embrace our approach, then of course it's kind of nonsense. This is why we want to be competitive all at the same time and all together. So the Ministry of Economic Development is now working hard managing the funds from recovery plan. And on Friday, I will speak during an important debate. The EU said clearly that the resources are necessary to make Europe more ecological and more environmental friendly, and 67% of that will have to be devoted to the environment. The recovery plan that our country will actually invest heavily on that, up to 31%. But what it is still important for the transition not to be a punishment for company, it will be important to invest into the recovery funds, also to build new successful supply chains. And this will be very useful for future generations in Italy as well. So it is important that the value has been created in our country to start with. So investing billions and not having the ability on how to deliver value on local territories, then of course it doesn't make sense. The risk is that we pay through our debt the production activities of other countries. So it is important to invest into the energy transition, the creation of new supply chains, the one of green hydrogen, batteries, to name a few, which will be very useful for heavy industry, but not only. And also it is important to valorize circular economy topics and the secondary raw materials market. So recycle of plastic, of course, goes into that direction as well. So the Ministry of Economic Development shall incentivize also multinational companies which are now working let's say, towards that ethics and aiming towards that transition. As I said at the very beginning, I am very happy that I can attend today to the launch of this think tank. All of these qualified and independent voices that can really support effectively our work within the ministry, at the government, and they support us through data, through challenges, as well as sharing best practices. And this is all indispensable for a debate to be fully fed and fully fledged. So my best wishes, and on behalf of the institutions, we look forward to work with all of you. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Vice Minister, for your words. And also thank you for touch basing on many different topics that we will spend some time later on, thinking about next generations, future generations. We want the transition to be fair and equal. I'm about to leave the floor to the next speaker, Minister Enrico Giovannini. Unfortunately, he cannot attend online today, but we met him yesterday and we recorded a video. Enrico Giovannini, he is Minister of Sustainable Infrastructure and Sustainable Mobility. He has been former Minister of Social Policies. He has been Director of ISTAT, the National Institute for Statistics, and is co-founder of the Italian Alliance for a Sustainable Development. So we asked him his perspective yesterday around the Italian leadership, and more in specific when it comes to the Next Generation EU funding, as well as the Italian Recovery and Resilience Plan. So I'm starting the video for everybody to enjoy. Thank you.
Con il piano di ripresa e resilienza l'Italia,
so through the recovery and resilience plan,
di un futuro diverso.
Italy needs to have a different future, and something that will have to do with sustainable mobility.
Delle 6 missioni.
And this is actually only one of the 6 missions that within our ministry we are trying to bring forward.
Che ci aiuti a fronteggiare la crisi climatica, a ridurre le emissioni.
Something that allows us to combat against the climate change and reduce the emissions.
Del trasporto su ferro, della mobilità.
Of course, we will start from the importance of moving towards rail transport. And I have to say that the government has heavily debated around this. So the Italian interpretation booth is apologizing, but unfortunately the audio from the video, it can barely be heard, I'm afraid.
Per questo ho voluto creare una consulta della società civile
So this is the reason why I have decided to organize a council that will allow us to further dig down into this debate. First of all, because we want the recovery and resilience plan to be fully fledged, but also to make it possible to define the way we will execute it. And we will share best practices as well as new construction techniques. We will obviously touch base on many different domains. And of course, the key objective would be to be able to assess the social, economic, and environmental impact of each and every project to ensure that working with the Institute of Research, we will be able to assess the impact I've just mentioned thoroughly and equally.
Delle infrastrutture sono settori ad alta intensità di lavoro maschile e quindi il rischio.
And perhaps also aiming at a greater gender equality in some domains. Research work is something that we will fully commit to as we execute the Italian recovery and resilience plan. And the key idea
infrastrutturali, non a caso il cambio di nome del Ministero da Ministero
is that we want to focus thoroughly, but not only on the importance of the infrastructure. And for that purpose, also, we decided to change the name of the ministry here in Italy no long ago. And unfortunately, I'm sharing with the English-speaking guests that it is almost impossible to capture what the minister is saying from the video, I'm afraid.
Anche perché abbiamo ottime pratiche anche in Italia in termini di imprese che sono all'avanguardia nelle nuove tecniche di costruzione.
We do have lots of great examples in Italy. We do have companies working with top-notch technologies. And that is the reason why we want to leverage such technology and such practices so that we may share them. Not long ago, I did sign a protocol that allows me to review entirely the type of maintenance that we currently have in road tunnels, and that is just one example. This is how I'm trying to modify on top of every single project, just the overall approach, working with civil society and research centers. Of course, the Agenda 2030 is what we all aim at and look at. So hopefully we will be able to play a crucial role, not only leading the way, but also working with all the different players and stakeholders. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Minister Giovannini. Unfortunately, we had some sound issue and the sound was not too clear. I had the opportunity of actually listening to the video yesterday, and the key topics that he meant to share was very much the commitment towards an integration at all levels, all domains, and also commitment to include civil society as well, which plays a crucial role in supporting the institutions and all the relevant players and stakeholders in bringing forward the climate goals. So thank you to the Ministry once again, and thank you speakers from the first session, Laurence Tubiana, Mr. La Camera, Minister Giovannini, and by Minister Alessandra Todde.
The role of Italian climate diplomacy in 2021. This segment, I will discuss with the speakers of this segment some important points. Let's start from the context. We have the international context this year is particularly dynamic. Many things happened. We saw some changes in the international arena with, Biden and the return of climate change on the US agenda, the emerging powers and the emerging competition that also Vice Minister Todde was mentioning with China. And in the European context, we also see some interesting dynamics with the French and the German elections coming soon, and the new balance emerging from after the Brexit. So it's a very interesting international context in which we can collocate some very important appointments for Italy. Italy has the presidency of the G20 and is co-hosting COP26 with the UK. And the UK at the same time is presiding the G7. So a lot of very interesting events and a new role emerging for Italy, a role of leadership also in this sense. So we're coming back to leadership. It's with all these international appointments and with these events coming up, Italy has a lot of opportunities. We know it's the major recipients of the European funds, but also great responsibilities to really take the lead and show the role that climate action can really move forward and be a source of opportunities. So what I would like to discuss with our next speakers is how we can actually support Italian climate diplomacy. So our speakers are Mark von Heuleken. He's the EU ambassador for climate diplomacy at the European Commission. Mr. von Heuleken was also the European Union ambassador to the World Trade Organization and has held numerous positions in several departments of the European Commission. Next speaker will be Federica Africano, Director of EU Affairs and International Climate Negotiations at the Italian Ministry of Ecological Transition. She also has had a long-standing career in various capacities in the Ministry of Environment. And finally, Nick Maybe, who is the Chief Executive Officer of E3G, a think tank. He's an expert on issues of climate diplomacy, foreign policy, European politics, and has also served in the UK Prime Minister's Strategy Unit leading work on climate change. So I would start with our first speaker, Mr. von Heuleken. Somewhere, I'm sorry, I have many faces in front of me here. Okay, happy to see you. I want to ask you a specific question. Italy needs to take the leadership. This is clear. Also, Professor Tubiana at the end gave us like a very detailed overview of their responsibilities in the dynamics in the changing scenario. How can the European Union support Italy achieving these outcomes? What the European Union can do to help navigate, especially considering the role of Italy in the G20 presidency. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you, Julia. Italy holds the G20 presidency at a really critical juncture in international climate and energy politics. This year is going to be a crunch time for the Paris agreement ambition cycle. And it's also going to be crucial for forging links between two crucial areas of policy. On the one hand, the economy and finance. On the other hand, the climate and energy policies needed to get to a zero carbon economy. In the international media, the drive behind this year's international climate action is sometimes portrayed as being twofold. You have next week's Earth Summit by the new US administration, and then you have the UNFCCC process culminating at the COP26 in Glasgow. That picture is actually simplistic. There is also the G7 process, and most importantly, the G20 process, because it assembles all the economies of the G20, which account for 80% of emissions, and with often widely diverging views on what climate action should be taken, by whom, and through what means. If you have found an agreement among G20 countries, the chances are you will also succeed multilaterally. That holds in particular this year, as the COP26 conference will come hot on the heels of the G20 summit. World leaders will, so to speak, travel from Rome straight away to Glasgow. As a G20 member, the role of us, the European Union, is to support Italy the best way we can so that solid summit and ministerial conclusions come out and work streams are launched that can lead to results under subsequent G20 presidencies. After Italy, there will be Indonesia and others to come, of course. Evidently, in the G20, we need to push the issues that we as EU have identified, for instance, back in January in the Foreign Affairs conclusions, have identified as our goals for climate and energy diplomacy, representing, so to speak, the external dimension of the European Green Deal. These issues relate in the main through or to enhanced mitigation targets for 2030 and the policies to bring them about, such as the promotion of energy efficiency and renewables, the exit from coal, increased research and innovation to arrive at technological breakthroughs in sectors that are currently hard to abate, initiatives on methane, the introduction of carbon taxes or carbon prices, and the phasing out of fossil fuel subsidies. For some of these issues, the time seems ripe for G20 progress. For others, the more modest goal is to put them or keep them on the table. As far as the G20 activities in 2021 are concerned, I think it's fair to say that on climate change, the G20 has just finished what you could call the warm-up lap. We have had a first climate and energy meeting. There are still two to come in preparation of the July ministerial in Naples. Now, what is striking in what is being discussed in the climate energy track on the one hand, and in the finance and economy track, is the emphasis on consistency. Consistency between those two tracks, which is wholly warranted, given the importance of the post-COVID stimulus packages and the massive scale of investment needs to move toward a zero carbon economy. As I said, that emphasis is not only very visible in the climate and energy track. If you look at the themes for the second and third meeting, they are very much on financial aspects of climate action. That's also visible in what has been discussed by finance ministers and the central bank governors. Notably last week, if you read the messages that have come out of that meeting, it's clear that they stress very much the need to have the right economic and financial policies to bring about the zero carbon economy. One concrete result was that they have created a permanent working group on sustainable finance, which will deal with many of the priorities of the EU that I've just listed. Now, we know that the G20 process is one of consensus. And given that there are still quite a few climate laggards in the group, one should be realistic about the results that Italy can achieve under its presidency. But still, following the climate neutrality announcements that took place last autumn and the change in US administration, there is unmistakably a momentum in global climate action that has been missing for many years. If you look at the countries that have made the climate neutrality pledge, and you add up their emissions, they represent close to 3/4 of emissions of the whole of G20. They have now established a long-term goal. The next logical step is to identify the 2030 target that is consistent with that long-term goal. And the next step in the reverse engineering is then to think about the policies that get us from here to 2030 in a cost-effective manner. That should be at the heart of the G20 discussions on climate and the economy. How we can bring about these 2030 targets while keeping our economy prosperous and providing jobs and opportunities for all. It is a task, that discussion is a task that all think tanks also need to contribute to convince informed public opinion that this transition to the low carbon economy is both doable and desirable. And I'm confident that ECCO, as a new think tank, will contribute and live up to that responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you for the very articulated response. And I'd really like to give the floor to our next speaker to actually go and look into what are the commitments that Italy has in front of itself and how Italy is getting ready for the G7, the COP26. So I'd give the floor to Federica Africano, please.
Thank
also
you.
In Italian.
Thank you, Julia. No, I will keep on speaking English since the colleague in this panel are English speaking. First of all, thank you to you and thank you to Luca for inviting me, and nice to see many faces that I know very well all over Francesco, my former boss. So very glad to see him here. Of course, first of all, let me say that, of course, climate priority is a priority, both on national level and on international level, and it's very much part of the agenda of our G20 presidency, where we are working and will keep on working to deliver all over, to push our colleague G20 partners in showing, of course, leadership. As Francesco said in his intervention, I mean, the transformation of our economy and the decarbonization, it's at the very heart. And this is the reason why we have decided to work together with other energy colleagues and to set up an energy and climate ministerial, because the two issues go hand in hand, as Francesco rightly highlighted. In terms of our program, I mean, Mark said it all. The important forthcoming meeting for us is, of course, the Energy and Climate Ministerial, which is scheduled by the end of July. Then, of course, the Leaders Summit in October, but in between and related to the climate issues, there are also several meetings within the finance track, which are very relevant also for the discussion. One is the Venice climate event, which will be jointly organized by the G20 Presidency with other key partners like the International Monetary Fund, the UNDP, World Bank, and the special UN envoy for climate finance. Which will be very much focused on how to progress towards the Paris Agreement alignment, which is an issue that we also will discuss in our group. And then the group that also Mark highlighted, which was resumed, which is the Sustainable Finance working group. In terms of delivery and horizontal issues, which is across the climate sustainability working group, but also the finance track, is of course the issue of recovery. The economic stimulus packages and the recovery plans that government are now putting in place, we all know, and we've been talking about it a lot, has the potential to create a recovery that is both green, and inclusive. We all know that if we get it right, the recovery can create opportunity for income, for jobs, for growth, and at the same time help us in accelerating our action both in the medium and the long term towards not only climate, but also in general the environment goal. So the G20 countries really have the opportunity to lead the way in the economic recovery, ensuring that this is aligned with the climate and the environmental goal. This is the, how to say, the underlying logic of using green stimulus as opposite to the one that does not have an environment component, demonstrating that the former one is a win-win policy. So this is very much part of our program. And of course, the question of alignment is key. Also, for boosting, as was already highlighted, income, jobs, and growth. So it's very relevant for the situation that we are all living. Then, of course, there is the issues of neutrality. The long-term strategy for neutrality. I mean, many G20 countries already, in a way, committed to it. So we are going to build on this commitment. Of course, the G20 it's a difficult. It's not that easy as the G7. It's a difficult client. It's much broader, and it is a contest where the national background and the difference from countries and the different starting point do matters to the discussion. So of course it will be a matter of finding the right languages and of pushing countries through the arguments that we are building, because the narrative in this sense is very it's very of course relevant. And of course we count in all our partners to help us in pushing the countries to go along with this commitment. To conclude, we have an ambition. We have, I would say, a right strong ambition within the G20 track, and we are determined through the different track. And this is, I think, the important thing. It's not only us. It's not only the climate group. It's not only the energy group, but it's an horizontal issues among the different track. And the finance part is of course very relevant, because in terms of having the right narrative for transforming the financial flow, aligning them to the Paris Agreement, but on the other side also creating the tools to do so, the fiscal space, the deliveries in terms of instrument that one can use both in the private and the public sector in order to boost this transformation are very rare. We will do our best, and we are working towards it. So we will see then where and how we will get it.
Thank you so much for your words. And yeah, definitely the G20 and the G7 are two different realities and they speak to different audiences, but there are some overlaps. And now that also Italy and UK are sharing the co-hosting of COP26, we need to discuss also the alignment between, you know, Italy and UK in making sure that the two agendas are delivering on the objectives of climate actions. And I want to ask this to Nick Maybe, who is with us. So how can we make sure that the UK and Italy are on the same page and they are delivering on the same objectives? I would give you the floor.
Okay, thank you. Just congratulations to the whole ECCO team, and particularly my colleague Luca for such a brilliant launch and setting up what's going to be an amazing partner for us working forward. And I think the first thing is to realize the difference. We were planning over a year ago to have the G7 and G20 be implementing the outcome of Glasgow, whereas now they're creating the foundations for successful Glasgow as we've been the movement of COVID, which in a way gives them more impetus. But also that means that the articulation between the G7 and G20 is even more important. So the first job, and it's sad to say this, but it means Brexit has undermined the relationship between the UK and Europe. And I think because Italy and the UK are working together as COP presidents, and in the G7, G20, one of the first roles of Italian diplomacy is to be a critical link between the UK and Europe to make sure that we align in the G7 and the G20 as in a way that we have as countries so long on financial and environmental and climate issues. I think that's the first job, is to rebuild those somewhat tattered diplomatic ties, which vaccines and other rows have said, because without that, we won't get the run through from the G7 to the G20, because again, unless the G7 shows leadership, there'll be no pressure or example for the G20 to follow. So some of the issues have been mentioned already, but some of the big issues, first one is to build the platform of cooperation. We need to have a year that is about cooperation, not about competition. The first thing is vaccines. The G7 will put forward a very strong vaccines package that needs to be taken forward by the G20 as well. India, China, Russia, and others are all key players in the vaccine. We need that to be seen as a point of cooperation for the most needy, not a point of geopolitical point scoring. And in a similar way, debt restructuring and how that will help support the SDGs in Paris is something the G20 has to run, but the G7 needs to set an example. And the third agenda on this kind of building the sense of cooperation globally is about resilience. COVID has shown we're not resilient. Climate has shown we're not resilient. The IMF is starting to reform the way it looks at debt and economic balance to allow countries to invest more in resilience. So it's not counted as a cost, but as an investment. Again, there's a whole set of agendas which would start to reform the economy. So countries are rewarded for investing in resilience rather than penalized by institutions like the credit rating agencies, the IMF. I think those are all really important run-throughs from the G7 to the G20. And then the second big agenda on top of cooperation is, of course, the green recovery. And some of the issues have been raised, but I think the G7 need to commit to a minimum green recovery. The US has plans, the EU already has put in plans, the UK has put some plans, Japan hopefully will put together more ambition, but we need to monitor that spend. We need to make sure it actually goes to green and set an example for the G20 to follow. We need to reform our public banks, not just the World Bank, but also our bilateral banks, so they don't invest in unsustainable fossil fuels. So they increase their investment in nature and resilience and climate change. Of course, the Chinese are huge investors overseas, but so are many other G20 countries. So I think that issue of public bank reform is going to be one of the big critical areas alongside the recovery itself. And none of these conversations are going to be easy. We've already seen statements from China and others saying that they don't want to see kind of bank reform, perhaps public bank reform as strongly as it could be, while other voices in China are pushing for public bank reform, including on the Belt and Road Initiative. So I think there's a lot to play for. We don't quite know how the geopolitics are going to show. The Biden summit will give us a bit of a taste of how things are working out. But I think two critical pieces for Italy. Firstly, Italy and UK working to follow up the Climate and Development Ministerial to bring in the voices outside the G7 and G20 into that debate. We know now what the vulnerable countries, the less developed countries need from a climate and development point of view, we should carry on giving them a voice into the debate so we can kind of keep the richer countries honest about when they say they're supporting the poor, they're actually reflecting what those countries actually want, not speaking on their behalf. And that's not just an OECD issue, that's an everyone issue. And the second one is, you know, it will be a rocky geopolitical year. US, China, India, there's a lot of tension out there. I think where the UK and Italy can work, particularly around the issues of debt and trade. I think those are some of the areas where we need a multilateral framework to dock in the great power rival. We don't want them fighting that out in bilateral relations. We need them to actually lock into the international system, the Paris Club, the G20, the WTO. Those are some of the big areas where, unless we see UK and Italy working with one voice, it's going to be very difficult to get the platform we need by the time we get to Glasgow.
Well, definitely a lot of work to be done and a lot of very interesting reflections. We don't have much time, but we heard from Italy, from think tank, from European Union, that we need to start doing something. We need to start committing. And what I would like to ask, really like a very, very, very short contribution from each of you, like a word on how actors like us, ECCO think tank, an independent think tank, can help the Italian leadership in this case to advance the agenda. So what do you think from the European Union perspective, from the Italian institutions and a peer and international think tank like E3G? If you can really comment on this very quickly. I would start with you, Mark, if you can.
Well, Julia, I think what you could, or would ECCO and other think tanks could contribute most valuably is workable ideas. Ideas that are, say, doable and that strike a chord in terms of implementability. There is still a lot to be done. To go from A to Z, that's the easy part. To go from A to B, that's the hard part. And I think their think tanks can do a lot of useful work. At the international policy level, we just don't have enough time to think ourselves about practical, good ideas, and those are precious.
Thank you so much. We'll do our best to work in this sense and suggest ideas and proposals. Federica, really, really shortly, we're very much
Well, I very much agree with what Mark has just said. There are two sides. On one side, the civil society are key actor for change, and so the work of your think tank it's very much welcome in terms of of helping pushing for making decisions at political level. We cope with the challenges that we are all living. And on the other side, as Mark was saying, I mean, you as an independent and with a rigorous approach from both the scientific and technical point of view, you can really provide with useful element of reflection for the political decision makers and help the way through.
Thanks. Nick, do you have a word of recommendation for us?
Yeah, good ideas are always wonderful, but they're no use if they're not politically in the right place. So I think the two things: one, Zoom diplomacy, much as this is a wonderful meeting, is still not like real diplomacy. So I think helping countries understand each other by organizing safe spaces where they're not talking on the record, but can understand these difficult, complicated new ideas, that's incredibly important, particularly between Rome, London, and Brussels in this here, and between that Trump and do on Zoom, actually. And the second is helping the public and the media understand what's very complicated. They're really confused about what this means and how it happens. So I think that interpretation, so they can decide whether this is good enough and what's happened, is incredibly important, because otherwise I fear that we will have a lot of content, but a very garbled story coming out of this year, given how crowded it is.
Great. Thank you so much to all our speakers in this segment. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Mark and Federica, for taking the time to being with us and sharing your experience. Adesso passiamo al prossimo segmento.
And we are now switching to the next session. We are very much running late, but we hope that everybody will be able to speak. Now we're back to Italy with the next session. I'm introducing a fully Italian roundtable, welcoming Professor Carlo Carraro, President Emeritus, Professor of Environmental Economics at Ca' Foscari University in Venice, is also Vice Chair of IPCC Working Group. Thank you so much, Mr. Carraro, for being with us. He'll be followed by Maria Grazia Midulla, Head of Climate and Energy, WWF Italy. She's been involved in international negotiations on climate ever since 2001, and she's also part of our scientific committee. Thank you, Maria Grazia, for being with us. Welcoming also Martina Comparelli. She is activist and spokesperson for Fridays for Future Italy, and Matteo Leonardi, who's co-founder, along with Luca. Matteo is an expert in energy policies as well as environmental policies. He's gained over 20 years experience in finding transformative solutions for the energy transition. We are going to speak through the need of changing the way we approach climate change. So we're lagging behind with respect to other countries, the way we're now thinking and interpreting climate change. At ECCO, we do believe that we need to create brand new narratives, rephrase the narratives, considering all the different aspects that have to do with climate change. So when we tackle climate change, we want to speak about the future of our planet without rhetorics here. We're talking about work, justice, health, international cooperation, and a lot more. I'd love to leave the floor to Maria Grazia first, and she is part of our scientific committee as well. ECCO is an independent think tank. Independence is for us a very important value. So what is your perspective on that? And how ECCO can deliver the contribution, and what makes us independent in the conversation around climate change? Well, I would love to reconnect to what you were saying earlier, and I actually realized that the foreign guests were pronouncing eco as opposed to echo. But now, aside from this play of words, well, my opinion is that in Italy right now, anything that used to come and still comes from civil society and more generally from institutions was often being considered as something that could become a kind of a commodity to trade, you know? And Italy, it is now becoming more mature around this topic. You introduced me by saying that I've been engaged in climate change ever since 2001. Yes, that's true. And the relationship, I remember back then, the relationship we had with one another was very much based on a skeptical approach. Other countries, other European countries were still talking through this. And instead in Italy, it was just ideology. We're no longer there. Well, everybody realized that the energy transition is there. It has to go forward. But let me say that the approach is still a wrong one. And often we actually take the wrong step into the debate as well. Instead, it would be very helpful to have a mature relationship with civil society, with the experts, and with the institutions as well. that mature relationship will allow us to truly be innovative and lead the transition, not just being subjected to it. Because actually, what the risk that Italy is running now, that is being subjected to it, that is not leading along with others. We're now on the eve of the approval of recovery fund. And of course, the debate has been biased strongly. And we do see trend and fads coming up and down all the time, whereas the country, Italy, should really try to be one country and understand what role they want to play in the energy transition. And but unfortunately, the ideas are often, let's say, very much oriented towards one party versus a different party. What I'm happy to say around the think tank is that perhaps the think tank may provide the public machine with some independent views and with the aim of coming to some consistent solutions and not so much biased. Thank you, Maria Grazia. So non-biased and non-contaminated, consistent solutions. I love the way you describe it. And actually, these solutions, they have to be based on a scientific approach. And that is a kind of the other pillar, the other founding pillar. So the independence on the one side, and also founding, let's say, our policies on scientific data and a rigorously scientific approach. Thank you so much, Maria Grazia. Sorry for interrupting, but we have a very, very small time available. So Carlo Carraro, can you tell us a bit around this other pillar that I was mentioning? Leave you the floor. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me, and apologies if I have to go in 5 minutes time. Unfortunately, we're running a bit late, but congratulations meanwhile for this beautiful initiative, as you have started a very important project for Italy. I'm not saying that nobody else is doing anything for that, but let me say that the approach from ECCO sounds very original, looks very original and interesting. So good luck from my side, and really hope things will work out the way you want. I'm sure we will get the chance to interact and collaborate over the next few years, because of course it is important to rely upon scientific data, and not only those on climate. Of course, there are of course there's a great deal of aspect to take into account, as well as the socio-economic ones as well. So the recovery and resilience plan will be a good base to start from. You will have to start from that as well. The approval of the first chapter will be year end, whereas the approval for volume 2 is now going to take place at 2022 because of COVID. Of course, we slowed everything down, and everybody is late right now. And actually, civil society would have a great opportunity now to jump into the scientific debate, and you also as ECCO. Because we will be welcoming you at the working group in IPCC. And actually, so far, the response from Italy has been very limited. Very few people were reviewing the documents we drafted, the volume we published. They didn't even read the summaries of that, the technical summaries for policymakers. So what I'm saying is that there is an interaction between civil society, and those who are really interested into climate change, not only in academia and in research center, because actually what we publish at IPCC, well, it's something truly valuable that can be useful to many different players, to many different industries. And that is something that really describes the reality, and especially when it comes to local geographies. So I think you could also play this role. So actually attending the drafting of these reports, because that would be very useful. As far as the content of this very work that we're now doing in our working group, well, let me say that we will perform a much greater and more accurate analysis of climate change soon. So soon we will be able to know more and also to inform policymakers around what's going on. Let's not forget that the solution for climate change really goes through the decision from entrepreneurs rather than decision from government. It is actually the private sector where the transformation is taking place. And so I'm sure we will be helping with the scientific piece. When it comes, say, to volume 1 and 2, climate change and its impact, well, the impact will be great, of course, because of the knowledge that we're gaining. Whereas volume 3, the one devoted to the economics, it will be weaker, perhaps, and will not be able to play an important role because of this missing introduction, which should have been there more, and also because everybody has really struggled to understand how the climate change consequences can be so pervasive and can really translate into important things that we have to do. So there is this difficulty still to translate impact into consequences that may favor growth, employment, the development of many industries, at the same time developing mitigation activities and evaluate cost and benefits. And this is something that we're very much struggling with. And we are now about to close cycle 6. We are approaching cycle 7. I'm sure we have a lot to do, and I'm sure you will be able to help a lot.
Come ponte tra i diversi attori della società civile, quindi anche tra l'accademia, il mondo scientifico e il resto della società. Vorrei passare adesso la parola a Martina.
I'd like to, yes, I have to go now. So thank you and goodbye to everybody. Thank you, Professor, and thank you very much. So I'd like to speak to you, Martina. When you talk about climate change, you have to talk about the future. You can't avoid it. So my question to you as a spokesperson, an activist in the youth movement, is: do you think that Italian policies, current Italian policies, take the intergenerational issue into account, and whether you think that youth movements in Italy are capable of influencing politics as we've seen internationally? So thank you, Martina. Thank you. And thank you for this great event, and above all for having this idea to create a think tank only on climate change. I'm convinced that research is constantly necessary on all fronts, and will definitely help our country and policies in the country. As far as climate policy is concerned in Italy, the short answer is no. It's not enough to have active. It's also not enough for future generations. It's already not enough for the existing generations, because the climate crisis is out of control. It's decisions are being taken, projects or decisions will be taken, people are deciding to take decisions that are not going to be sufficient. So at the beginning of the meeting, you were talking about speed as the missing factor, and you also have to consider that it's not just in science, but also in policies, that people don't take things through to the end. They don't finish them off. So scientific measures are insufficient to remain within this 1.5 degree limit. And so the point that we really need to focus on and to hammer home is that the current generations are already effective, and as activists, our job is to not just to present reality, i.e. science, but also to talk about the better world that we want to create. So we need to talk about our future and future generations in terms of fairness, because many scientific indications, many ideas already exist. The problem is that they're not being implemented. And I often ask why, and the answers that I've found so far is that it's a question of values. So from a certain point of view, you wonder whether the response to climate change needs to be a certain type of policy that some parties in parliament and in government are just not in touch with, perhaps. I think the point is that we focus, at least politics has focused, especially in America, on the extent to which climate change is an issue depending on which side of parliament you're sitting in. So if you don't like the solutions that have been proposed thus far, then you don't have to take any notice of it, because you'd have to propose something perhaps your voters wouldn't like. But I think we need to go beyond this. I think we need to show people that the climate crisis affects everybody, and that the solutions will benefit everybody. Not taking action will be a disaster for everybody. I think obviously this will affect, of course, the more disadvantaged people in the population. Obviously, it's unfair for us at Fridays for Future, but we need to start to understand to what extent we can talk about this, or at least science and politics can talk about it from the point of view of values. I think it's a question of values. And as activists, we always look at social justice, but this is a provocative statement I wanted to pass on to policymakers. Thank you so much, Martina, for your contribution. I would like to give the floor to Matteo to summarize a little bit. You know, we've got a lot to do, we have a lot of work to do. We've listened to all of our speakers, and it seems that there's a lot to do, but we're optimistic. So what's your view? Well, first of all, thank you to all those who took part, and especially to those who have contributed to the creation of ECCO with ideas and with their work. We started today looking at Italy's role in the international context, but then we realized, of course, that in Italy, which of course does have an important international role, as was pointed out today, but that in Italy we have a very weak player in our civil society. The resources that are spent nowadays to open a think tank aligned with European ideas and independence. So the resources have been directed in that sense, and we need these independent think tanks, an independent think tank focusing on energy. We thought it was a need, and we still think it's a good idea. I think that's been shown by the contributors today. I think it's been shown by the feedback that we've received, and I think that it's also shown physically by the volume of work that has we've seen arriving in our first few weeks. So I'd like to wind up by underlining this issue of independence, because for us, independence means that our resources will be solely from international foundations, national foundations, and the public, and that there will be no contributions from the private sector, but not because obviously we're judging anyone, but because as climate change currently is becoming a fundamental issue, a fundamental area in which significant amounts of money and European budgets are being invested, significant amounts of national budgets are being invested, it's important to create organizations that can navigate between the interests of business and the role of the government, the state. One of the last speakers was saying that there is a symmetry in between business and the role of the state. And of course, the state and consequently politics mustn't be captured by this symmetry, by this parallel path. Otherwise, how are we going to be able to guarantee, to give a banal example, that phasing out coal is not simply dealt with as a network, a mains issue, and not turned, a utility issue, not turned into a development opportunity? How to ensure that hydrogen is tailored to scientific needs during decarbonization and not on short-term needs of eliminating fossil fuels, which requires resources. I mean, all of these issues can only be guaranteed when we are able to strengthen the civil society, when civil society is monitoring the situation, and to ensure that it's not just a question of technology and economics, but that this extends not only to discussions, but in policy development, it extends to other dimensions, whether generational. We've had Martina here for that very reason, for employment development, into international cooperation, for example. So when, because of the Green Deal, Europe will not consume fossil fuels any longer, what will our relationship with the countries that have provided us with these fossil fuels for so long be? This is the kind of thing we'll be looking into. And I'd like to say thanks to, and again, thanks to underline that, to the resources from international philanthropy. We'll be able to extend our work, and I hope we'll be working well, into the need to sustain our initiative and other initiatives, and especially to directing resources to strengthen civil society to protect climate and to reinforce policies to combat climate change. One very last comment I'd like to make is that it is clear that the program that Luca has told you about earlier, and which we distributed at the end of the event, is extremely ambitious, obviously, and clearly our assumption that we only want to use philanthropy is ambitious, of course, but it's also true that over 20 years of working on climate, ambition becomes something more of an everyday nature. And so we are here because we want to be ambitious, because what we're saying, we hope will, in time and in the shortest possible time, become something that we all see as normal, just as it will be normal to try to work with everybody, all the players, to create a space, as we said, as we heard today, for dialogue, discussion, strategies, transformation of climate policies. So when we're asked to propose workable ideas as an assumption for this, we need a space in which civil society is able to talk about this and is also considered a valid interlocutor. and contributor in this debate. And it's not just a question of looking at business and government, but that there is active involvement of civil society, and that's what we're here for. And I hope we're going to be here for quite a while doing this. So thank you to everyone who's taken part. Obviously, our work will start now. Thank you so much, Matteo, for explaining our viewpoint and what we intend to do. This is what I was referring to when talking about our inception document as a document that's an open document and a work in progress. So open to the contribution of everyone. We're going to have a lovely close here with the contribution of a virtual photographic gallery, which Luca Bergamosky has offered to us. He's an internationally renowned photographer who's won various awards, including World Press Photo and World Photography Awards, and his focus is specifically on energy and the climate. So I think we have a video to show, so I'll leave that to, is that you, Luca? Thank you. Yes, here we are, yes. So yes, I'm Luca Bergamosky. I'm a visual storyteller, and my work focuses on people who do not have technology and on the environment. And I've tried to show people this transition by, as I travel around the world, and looking at the best solutions around the world that people have practically used to tackle climate change and obviously I work as a documentarist, as a journalist. I work for the National Geographic, and I work with other publications such as Time, the New York Times, and others. And there's a growing, if you like, interest in these topics. So this has helped me and my work. It's made me very visible, and something I've been working on for many years. So obviously I've won several important prizes and awards, and exhibited, for example, at the Guggenheim in New York and in Shanghai, and et cetera, et cetera. So in some way, I try to translate in visual terms and show the appeal of what you do effectively. So in the field. So I'm not an expert. I know quite a lot about it, obviously, because this is something I've been focusing on for some years, and I spent lots of time talking to people like yourselves, but my work, also with journalists, of course, and a whole bunch of other people who have given me the chance to understand a little bit more about it, so that my work can show people these appealing images, if you like, these slightly dystopic images, or then maybe they'll be published in a magazine. And at that point, they might read the caption and find that there's an actual practical solution somewhere on the other side of the world to a problem, and it arouses their curiosity. And so I hope I am extending and expanding the audience, if you like. So that's what I do. I know that they have a short film, because that's my language, photos and videos. So hopefully we should be able to see that.
fear for the future and skepticism concerning progress have today become more topical than ever. My aim through my work is to present the viewer with a debate regarding our concept of growth and our relationship with nature and technology. For a long time, technological progress has represented the foundation upon which utopian visions of the future were built. It has allowed us to have access to an extraordinary number of products and to a comfort unimaginable to previous generations. Today, however, as never before, we are also becoming conscious of its dark side, of the damage it caused in the past, as well as the risk implied in living in a highly technological world. Never before have we had such an occasion to reflect on what our attitude should be in the future, as we had in this difficult time of the COVID-19, which has brought the world to a halt. This allows us to consider what our efforts must be in order to reestablish a healthy relationship with nature and the planet.
Foto bellissime, grazie Luca.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Luca, so much. And also like to thank you for the picture that we use on our post-its, one of yours. So thank you also for allowing us to use this very important moving photograph. I'm afraid we've gone over our deadline, but perhaps we'll have a little time for questions. It's 5:15 if you'd like to stay with us. I know that some people might have to leave, but we do have some questions that people have written in the Q&A box below. So I'm going to ask these of my ECCO colleagues. The first one is Stephanie Brancaforte, who had to go actually, but the question is, how does ECCO envision working together with the civil society ecosystem? That's a very interesting question. Then we have Amedeo Clavarino, the last one, who says, I'd like to know ECCO's position on the date for achieving CO2 neutrality when 2/3 of the planet will not optimistically reach it before 2060. And so to achieve net CO2 neutrality globally, the residual third would have to do that by 2030. Who'd like to answer that question? The first question, how to interact with the civil society ecosystem and our position on climate CO2 neutrality, carbon neutrality. Well, I'll answer on net CO2 neutrality. When science and its scientific scenarios that say that the cost of not taking action is much greater than of taking action, you have to speed up the transition and achieve CO2 neutrality as soon as possible. And given that technology and businesses and therefore the systems that create demand for products that circulate energy transform, then the transformation can be a lot quicker than we can imagine. So on the one hand, you have to look at the targets and the strategies in the various countries. And on the other hand, if we accelerate the process in companies, we might all get there by 2050. So let's not be alarmed. I think our priority is to speed up our situation with our technology, our capital, which is extremely high. We need to speed up this transformation of technology and production processes. And then we can be fully aware that the scenario is based on scientific facts, which are the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, of course. Thank you, Matteo, for that. Luca, would you like to take the other question? Yes, thank you, Julia. And thank you, everyone, again. In Italy, civil society is highly developed and extremely virtuous, especially the kind of activity that in recent years has supported the concept of environmentalism, quite a mature environmentalism for us. What we need to understand is how to support using our analyses and scenarios, qualitative and quantitative analyses, how we can support the needs of civil society and of environmental associations, and how we can link together and contact ourselves, people, with other stakeholders who might be in politics, they might be in business, they might be in Italian philanthropy. So how to link all those together. So it's a connecting and coordination role. We want to try to offer this so that we can have a greater collective impact than just the sum of the parts, if you like. So we will be working in that direction, and in particular, we'd like to bring the European and international dimension to the attention of Italians so that we can create links there as well. But also we want to make sure people hear our civil society internationally. So Italy has a presence with a much stronger voice. It may be at COP26, but there are plenty of other international dialogues where Italy needs to be present and represented. So it won't be just us, but there'll be lots of us, and not just in working with environmentalists, but working with all the powers of society, working on development, for example, working on issues such as poverty or inequality, social inequalities, employment. We have to work with all of these areas and introduce climate as a topic so that it can be tackled by everybody in an appropriate way. So we will be trying to take this integration process for including representation, integration representation. Let's hope we can manage to do that. Thank you. We've received some other questions now. I think we'll do one more because we've gone over time. This is Guido Cervini. Do you perceive that ECCO's objectives are compatible with a market-based energy industry, or do you believe that they perceive that they require major changes in the way that in the role that markets and political system play in allocating resources? I think that's for you, Matteo. Yes, of course. We don't need to be balanced. Of course, it's an issue in the sense that economic resources are not balanced, and it would be useful, I'd say, more for philanthropy than for the institutions to balance this out. I don't think I would invent or make major proposals, but what I would try to do is to identify the problem. And the problem is what we're doing, what we're launching now, which I think has emerged from the launch from our presentation, but also from the vision that we wanted to we had for Italy's role, is that to underline that what we're doing is financed by international resources and not by Italian resources. So I'd start by highlighting that phenomenon before starting to discuss what the relations are between the various economic forces of the various players. I'd focus on that first. Okay. Yeah, I'd say something like something too as well, Julie, if that's okay. So thanks to Maria Rosa Virdis, who I'd like to say hello to, who has said, how do you think to develop your the analytical work you need to carry out? Obviously, there are two ways. We have the qualitative and quantitative side, which are equally important. We'll have research budgets that we'd like to spend, especially on identifying decarbonization scenarios in three areas, specific areas. which are steel, chemicals, and concrete. And these research budgets will be quite will allow us to develop some ambitious projects with research centers that we will be selecting for their independence, for their skills, so that we can develop scenarios that Italy does not have right now. And this is a major quantitative gap, because we do have the ability to do this, to develop scenarios, but we haven't got the outcome. It hasn't happened. So we need to show that in an open and transparent conversation, that these are ambitious scenarios which show the climate reality of climate change and the various scenarios. And this, I think, we'll be trying to do with international institutions and so national institutions, obviously, and if national institutions don't want to, it will be something we do internationally, because we need to develop those scenarios and we need to have those bases on which to found our future work. The second qualitative part is something we will be doing ourselves through secondary research and through interpreting facts, data, scientific facts and data, so that we can highlight the dynamics that drive the economy, society, and technology. So we can bring to Italy the scenarios and the data that show the latest figures and show the difference between the actual perception of technology in Italy to do. But I think the European debate is ahead of Italy at this point. So we need to bring that home and to show where innovation is now in the Italian market for technology, for the green economy technologies. So by showing and speaking analytically where the market is, we'll need to show the risks and opportunities of staying behind or becoming more competitive. And this conversation, this discussion, would like to base on quantitative and qualitative analyses, which will be developed in the coming months, and we hope over the coming years as well.
Grazie, Luca.
Thank you. Thank you, Luca. Thank you, Matteo. I think we can close. It's been a very interesting conversation.
Essere qui e moderare questo evento.
It's been a pleasure for me to be moderator today, and I'd also like to thank all of you once again for all of those who've taken part and all of those who've spoken. It's been a marathon, and I'd like to invite you to follow us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and I think our video will be available, the video of the event will be available on YouTube. So